Hello everyone, it's Annie and Jacob at Labyrinth Books once again, here to talk to you about more excellent new children's books, and today we're going to talk about some new nonfiction stuff.
Yeah. So one of the first books I'll talk about here is The Apartment. It is a century of Russian history. It is a big old picture book with some very cluttered illustrations. It is also a dual search and find book. So every page, every person's apartment will have things to look for, things to hunt for. I should say the general premise of this nonfiction book is exploring how the Russian people lived at various points in Russian history up through the 20th century.
And starting right at the end of the Tsarist period, right?
Right. So it gives an overview of what was going on at the time, but also a really the details. What always gets me is because it includes poems and newspaper clippings and passages and songs, and also just what things looked like. Well, what did you have in your apartment that could cook food? What did you have in your apartment that you kept your things in? There's all these memorabilia like little transit tokens of how you got to and from work.
This one is so great because you can start to see in 1973, when you started at the beginning, this was all one family's apartment.
Yes.
And how many people are living in this one now? Do you know?
Not off the top of the head of this one, but
a bunch.
A bunch. And it's also the design changes and the layouts change from both from necessity and style and taste. It is incredibly well researched and incredibly true to life. So much to the point where it has, and this is kind of a thing I'm a sucker for in big picture books, is it has a bibliography of you can go.
That's how they did it right.
Yes, exactly. So here's the journals we used. Here's where we found these excerpts from people's lives. If you want to find out where the poems we got from, here's where you can look for those poems. I doubt any child might. Not too many children might look for the standardized version of the poem collected in English by Joseph Brodsky.
Interestingly, probably a different bibliography that it started out with, because I think it's translated from Russian.
That makes sense. Give it a look if you're into deep dives of the personal lives of people throughout various important moments in history that you probably learn about in class a little bit, but you're just, if you were like me, you're like, and then there was the Soviet Union, and then there wasn't.
Right.
Moving on.
Right. Well, and kids this age in school in this country mostly get American history forever.
Yeah.
So they're not getting this kind of look at different countries. So this can be especially interesting, but also I feel like there's a special place for books like this for kids who are, again, maybe not totally drawn to reading a whole novel, but liked Richard Scarry as kids, Where's Waldo as kids, picture books.
Yes.
This is fascinating because it's got a lot of really interesting information.
It's got a ton of information.
Yeah, and it's visually so interesting and so involved. In a similar vein, his picture books about history, Lost Cities by Fitz LaRoche is a look at lost cities throughout history. So, again, cool end papers, right? These illustrations are pretty stunning. They're all made with different cut papers. The note of the artwork at the end gives you a sense of how he puts these things together.
It's very cool.
It's really cool. These details are so tiny and precise, and they make for really compelling textured illustrations. And then you've got just really fascinating information.
Yeah.
So, a way to introduce the kid to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. We don't know how the water got there, kids, but it's pretty cool.
It's pretty neat.
So for each location, it gives you some information, background. It tells you where it was. It tells you who lived there. It tells you why it was lost.
Yeah.
It tells you how it was found. And it tells you what's mysterious, which is always that was the thing as a kid. That
for sure. You always would be like, but what happened?
Yeah, what happened? No one knows. I think this is the one that when I was reading it with my kids kind of blew my mind. And I don't know if the kids were as excited as I was, but Akrotiri on the island of Thera in 2200 BCE had hot and cold running water.
That is pretty amazing.
That's amazing. You could take a hot bath.
I will say this is like a great album where it's like you got your classics on one side and then you got your deep cut B-sides on the other.
Right.
Because there's a lot of places I did not know about.
Great Zimbabwe.
Great Zimbabwe.
The map at the end gives you a timeline,
Mhm.
and it also gives you a sense of, like, you know, he really did pick a nice
Yeah.
Spread, right?
Mhm. He made a concentrated effort to
Right. So
to
you've got
hit-
Angkor Wat, and you've got Machu Picchu, and you've got Jamestown, and you've got Mesa Verde, and Tenochtitlan, and Rapa Nui, and
Yes.
it's a fun way to spend some time.
Absolutely.
And look at the tiny llamas.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. You will hear more about llamas in an upcoming video, so stay tuned.
Speaking of learning surprising things in books, this was actually, this I think we talked about was a sleeper hit for both of us. It's called 1919 by Martin W. Sandler. It won the National Book Award last year, and I was like, who? Who won? What won? This book?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
And then, so naturally we picked some up.
Yeah.
And
Well, history for this age doesn't always do that well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, sometimes we miss some, and I missed this for sure.
Oh, I
But I'm so glad that it's here now.
Yeah, going through it. So I should say it's generally just 1919, the year that changed America. But what it chooses to tackle in that year and the way it does is spookily relevant.
In a way that he had no way of knowing.
And
when he wrote the
he
book.
really, really didn't, because this book was a 2019 book. The idea was being 100 years in the future. But it covers everything from the Red Summer to there's like the classic stuff. There's like Prohibition. What happened after World War I? Strikes that were very prevalent in this time. Work strikes. Particularly, it mentions the Seattle strike, a dock workers strike, which this is a fun fact from the book, before the strike was a day old, 800 troops had arrived in downtown Seattle and taken up positions. Which, yes, feels very relevant to just kind of draw people's attention to the fact that this is nothing new. Again, kind of like Lost Cities, it covers all of the things you kind of want your kids to know. Like, oh, you gotta learn about World War I, you gotta look at women's suffrage, the Prohibition. But it's also going to throw in a lot of, I want to say, Howard Zinn-esque references to worker strikes, race riots, the real idea of corporations kind of becoming this entity we all now have to deal with in a different way.
Corporations are people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty heady, I will say that.
Would you say it's middle grade? Like,
For sure middle
Yeah.
grade.
read to a 9-year-old, or too much to
Maybe
handle?
read to a 9-year-old. As I'll put some stills in and whatnot, but as you can see, there's not a ton of photos. There's enough. There's just a couple per page, but it is a little more. And also, these stories are not truncated; they are long form narratives. So you'll get a whole chapter on strikes, and there'll be several pages on just one strike. It takes some digesting.
Yeah.
Even if they don't have.
That could be the beginning of some really fascinating conversations.
Absolutely. So I guess just generally in summation, very long chapters, very detailed. He'll do this thing where after a long passage, he'll finish up with, and 100 years later, this is what we're seeing today.
So, like, strong narrative through lines and then connections to the present.
Yes, and it feels at times a little textbooky, which is the only thing I'm worried about when kids have to read it, because it does feel like kind of how you would read, like you would reading a textbook, at least I remember in school, and then like you'd see like off to the side, like, think about how this affects you today.
Pull-outs.
Yeah, like can you think of a time where this happened in your lifetime? Feels a little bit like that, but the subjects covered and the weight given to them, nothing is played for cheapness. It's all given space to breathe.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fairly hefty book, and for a reason, because he's covering pretty heavy topics. So yeah, if you got an ambitious middle grader, I say give them a go.
Or if you just like want a way maybe to talk through some of the things that are going on in the country right now with
Yes.
some context. And in that way, those like textbooky feeling questions
Yeah.
might be really good entry points to a conversation that helps
Absolutely.
us contextualize some of the stuff.
Absolutely, yes. I guess this could just be called context to the book.
I would like now to bring your attention to the Catman of Aleppo. And like 1919, sort of brings in activism and some of the things that can be done in the face of things that seem hopeless.
Yeah.
This is a really beautifully made picture book, nonfiction. It operates with a narrative. It's a single narrative, and it is about a man who was an ambulance driver in Syria, in Aleppo. And it starts. I love that it starts with
Yeah.
a beautiful view of the man in the market in the city that he loves, and you see a view of Aleppo that
Mm-hmm.
you don't see
No.
anymore.
No.
And then the war comes, and this is another really striking,
It's a very striking image, but it works really well.
And he stays and he drives ambulances, trying to deal with the constant grief and loss in the city that he loves, and trying to figure out what he can do.
Yeah.
And he keeps seeing all these cats that have been abandoned
Mhm.
by people who've had to leave. And so he puts together a place where where he can take care of the animals that have been left, and where people can leave animals
Yeah.
if they need to leave. And by doing so, he finds a way to do what he can.
Yeah.
In an impossible situation. And so you see all these, so here he is at the market buying meat for the cats.
Mhm.
And the children are helping him, and then
That's my
this-
favorite page.
yeah,
Bing.
this image of the children helping him feed the cats. And so, and it becomes something that people around the world
Yeah.
donate to. It's one of those stories that sort of helps to give a little bit of context to something that can seem so huge that you can't imagine it.
Yeah.
And a sense that people can act
Yeah.
in ways that make a difference, even in ways that might seem small. I like things that give back a little bit of a sense of agency when
Yes.
we all feel,
Yes.
when some of us feel a little helpless.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us. We hope you've seen books that you like, and
Yeah.
give us a call.
Yeah.
Check out the website. Talk to us about books. We love to talk about books.
Yes, we do.
And we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.